Picture a wooden box on wheels about the size of a modern minivan. Now put 9 adult strangers inside it. Add a woman with a crying infant, a whiskey drummer who hasn't bathed since Missouri, a consumptive man coughing blood into a handkerchief, and you, wedged between them with your knees interlocked with the knees of the person facing you. Add summer heat. Add alkali dust so fine it works through closed curtains, through your clothing, into your ears, into your food, into the baby's mouth. Now shake the box. Not gently. Shake it the way a terrier shakes a rat day and night without stopping for 9 days. That's a Concord stagecoach crossing the Great Plains in 1865, the most advanced passenger transportation on the continent, the pride of American engineering, a rolling, jolting, dust-choked torture chamber that people paid $175 in gold to ride, which is roughly what a working man earned in 6 months. They paid half a year's wages for the privilege of not sleeping for a week and a half. A vehicle where you could watch the sun rise over an ocean of grass in the morning and find an arrow buried in the door panel by evening. We're going back there tonight, not as historians admiring the coach in a museum, all polished and quiet behind a velvet rope. We're climbing inside it. One journey, one person. Everything they would have felt, smelled, heard, and survived between the Missouri River and the Rocky Mountains. So I make these history stories, and honestly, I have no clue if anyone actually sleeps to them, or if you're all just weirdos who enjoy hearing about strangers vomiting out of coach windows at 3 a.m. Either way, subscribe if you want. Get comfortable. You're about to spend 9 days in a box, so appreciate that mattress of yours. Here we go. The door of the coach is open, and a man is telling you to hurry, and you have already made your first mistake because you have eaten a large breakfast. You don't know it's a mistake yet. You'll know within 2 hours somewhere west of Atchison, Kansas, when the coach drops into the 40th chuck hole of the morning and your stomach tries to climb out through your throat. The old-timers don't eat before boarding. The old-timers eat light for 2 days before boarding. Nobody told you this, because you are 19 years old. You're from a farm outside Chillicothe, Ohio, and the sum total of your travel experience is a riverboat and a railroad car, both of which move like a mother's arms compared to what you are about to endure. Your name is Elias Merritt. It is the 2nd week of June, 1865. The war ended 2 months ago. Lincoln has been dead for 8 weeks, and half the country seems to have decided all at once to go west. You are one of them. In your coat, sewn into the lining by your mother, are $300 in greenbacks, your dead brother's letter from a mining camp in Colorado Territory, and the reason you're here. The letter says James struck a paying claim near Central City before the fever took him, and a claim needs a living merit standing on it or it goes to whoever jumps it first. Somebody may be jumping it right now. Every day you're not there is a day the ground your brother died for slips away. That is why you're not walking beside a wagon train, which is cheap and takes 2 months. That is why you handed the agent of Ben Holliday's Overland Stage Line $175, nearly 2/3 of everything you have for a ticket to Denver City. 9 days, the agent said. 9 days if the rivers behave, if the mules stay healthy, if the Cheyenne and the Arapaho keep to the treaty lines they have every reason not to keep. Because this very spring, soldiers massacred their people at Sand Creek and burned the plains into a war zone. The agent did not mention that last part. You learned it from a newspaper on the boat, and you have been trying not to think about it since. Board or stay, son, mail waits for no man. The driver's looking down at you from the box seat, and he is the first genuinely frightening person you have met on this journey. Not frightening the way a bully is frightening the way weather is. He's maybe 50, maybe 70, impossible to say. His face cured to the colour and texture of a saddle, a grey moustache stained amber at the edges with tobacco, and hands, you notice, that seem too large for his body, the fingers thick and split-nailed, 3 lines of leather ribbon woven through them. Those ribbons are the reins of 6 horses, and men like him are called Jehus out here, after the chariot driver in the Book of Kings who drove furiously, and everything about him says he has forgotten more about this road than you will ever learn. You climb in. Understand what climbing in means. The Concord coach has 3 bench seats inside. The rear seat faces forward and has a backrest, and it is the good seat, and it is taken, and it will remain taken by the same 3 people for the next 9 days, because seat position is established at boarding and defended afterward like territory in wartime. The front seat faces backward, which means you ride the whole journey watching where you've been while your inner ear insists you're falling, and between them the middle bench, a plank with no backrest at all, only a broad leather strap hung from the ceiling to lean against. The strap is worn shiny and dark from the spines of 1,000 previous sufferers. You get the middle bench. Of course you get the middle bench. You're the youngest, the greenest, the last aboard. You sit, and immediately there is the problem of legs. 9 passengers, 3 benches, and the space between the middle bench and the rear bench is not wide enough for 2 rows of knees, so you interlock. Your right knee slides between the knees of the man facing you, a heavy-set cattle buyer from Leavenworth, and his knee slides between yours, and there you are, laced together with a stranger-like fingers folded in prayer, and you will remain laced together through heat and dust and darkness for over 600 miles. The first thing you learn about the Overland Stage is that privacy does not survive the first minute. The cattle buyer looks at you, at your clean collar, at your soft hands. First run? Yes, sir. He nods slowly, the nod of a man confirming a diagnosis, and shifts his chewing tobacco from one cheek to the other. You'll want to keep your teeth apart when we're rolling. Fellow last month clacked his jaw shut on a bad crossing, bit through his own tongue, bled down his shirt for 20 mile. You keep your teeth apart. Above you, on the roof, the mess of thumps and scrapes is the express boxes and mail sacks being lashed down. 2,500 pounds of it, because you must understand this. The stage line does not exist to carry you. The stage line exists to carry the United States mail, for which Ben Holliday collects nearly $1 million a year from the government, and the mail rides in the boot and under the seats and beneath your feet, hard canvas sacks that will bruise your ankles for a week, and you, Elias Merritt, are freight of a lower priority. If weight must be shed on a muddy grade, the mail stays. You walk. Somewhere behind the station a horse screams and another answers, and there's the jingle of trace chains, and then the whole coach shudders as the driver takes up his lines. Beside him climbs the conductor, the man actually responsible for mail, passengers and treasure box, a lean fellow with a shotgun across his knees. And it occurs to you for the first time, but not the last, that they would not give the man a shotgun if there were nothing out there to shoot at. Friends, the driver says, not turning around, his voice carrying through the open windows flat and unhurried. Keep your arms inside. If she goes over, ride her down. Them that jumps is them that breaks. That is the entire safety briefing. Ride her down. Them that jumps is them that breaks. Then he speaks to the horses, one soft syllable, and 6 animals hit their collars at once, and the coach does not roll forward so much as leap. and the leather thoroughbraces beneath the body catch the lurch and turn it into a deep, swooping roll. And Atchison, Kansas, the last town, the last brick buildings, the last plank sidewalks and church bells and locked doors you will see for 600 miles, begins to slide away behind you. The woman with the infant crosses herself. The whiskey drummer takes a pull from his flask before the coach clears the town limits, and you, watching the roofline of the stage office shrink through the rear window, feel your breakfast shift ominously, and understand that whatever you imagined this journey would be, you imagined wrong. Here is what nobody in the East understands about the Concord coach, and you learn it in the first 10 miles. The coach has no springs. Steel springs, the engineers found, snap on frontier roads, and they transmit every jolt straight up the passengers' spines like a hammer blow. So instead, the coach body, all 2,500 pounds of it plus mail plus 9 human beings, hangs suspended on 2 enormous straps of layered bullhide called thoroughbraces, each strap built from many plies of leather thick as a Bible. The body swings on them, it rocks, it pitches and rolls like a small boat in a crossing sea, endlessly, ceaselessly, in every direction at once. Mark Twain, who made this same run 4 years before you, called the Concord a cradle on wheels, and he meant it half as a compliment. What he did not say plainly enough is what the cradle does to a stomach that has just been filled with fried ham, biscuits and coffee. By the 10-mile marker, you are sweating cold. By the 12-mile marker, the cattle buyer, without a word, without even looking at you, reaches across and unlatches the leather curtain by your shoulder, rolling it up and tying it. He has seen this before. By mile 14, you have your head out the window and everything your mother's cousin fed you at dawn goes into the blue-stem grass of eastern Kansas at 9 miles an hour. And the drummer laughs, and the woman with the baby looks away with a delicacy you will be grateful for the rest of your life. And the driver, who misses nothing that happens on his coach, calls back one word: better. It is, actually, better. You wipe your mouth on your sleeve because your handkerchief is buried in your valise, and your valise is under the mail, and the mail is under everything, and you settle back onto the backless bench and hook your arm through the ceiling strap and begin the real work of the journey, which is this: enduring. The rhythm takes you over. There is no fighting it. Sway, drop, catch. Sway, drop, catch. The thoroughbraces breathing under the coach with a sound like a saddle creaking, multiplied by 100. The drumming of 24 hooves, the dry rattle of the doors in their frames, the fine squeal of the front axle that the drivers grease at every home station and that begins crying again within 5 miles. Grit between your molars already, and you cannot remember when you first noticed it, and you will not be free of it for 2 weeks after the journey ends. Sway, drop, catch. You're 19 years old. You have half a year's fortune sewn into your coat. Your brother is 2 months in the ground at the foot of a mountain you have never seen, and the grass goes to the horizon in every direction like the sea, and this box is your whole world now. And this is only hour 1. The first station comes at 12 miles, and it teaches you the second law of the Overland Road. The coach does not rest. Ever. You feel the driver check the team, and through the window you see it. A low sod building squatting on the prairie with a pole corral beside it, and your whole body floods with relief because you assume, reasonably, like a human being, that this is a stop, that you will get out. Stretch. Drink water. Stand on ground that is not moving. The coach rolls into the station yard at a trot, and 2 men are already running out of the barn leading 4 fresh horses in harness, and what happens next takes, you will time it later out of disbelief, well under 5 minutes. The stock tenders strip the incoming team out of the traces while the animals are still blowing, hook the fresh team in, buckle, snap, back the leaders into place, and the driver never leaves his box, never sets the brake longer than it takes to swap the horseflesh, and one of the tenders slaps the near wheeler on the rump and calls "clear," and you are moving again, and you never touch the ground. This is a swing station. There are dozens of them ahead of you, spaced 10 to 15 miles apart, the whole length of the road, each one a couple of men living alone in a dirt-roofed hut in the middle of a hostile immensity, existing for one purpose, to have fresh animals in harness before the coach's dust settles. Between the Missouri and Denver, the line keeps hundreds of horses and mules and dozens of these stations, an entire civilization of grease, hay, and loneliness, strung out like beads on a 600-mile string, and all of it exists so that the mail never stops moving. You will change teams roughly every 2 hours, day and night for 9 days. The horses rest. The drivers change every 50 or 60 miles. The conductor changes at his division. The passengers never change. The passengers ride. When do we sleep, you ask the cattle buyer, and you hear how young the question sounds even as it leaves your mouth. He smiles around his tobacco, and there is real pity in it. You're sitting in your bed, son, 9 days, sitting up, on a backless plank, locked knee to knee with strangers, sleeping, when you sleep at all, in the swaying dark with your head on a mail sack or a stranger's shoulder, whoever's shoulder happens to be there, because the etiquette of the coach, you will learn, is that at night all shoulders are common property. Let me tell you who is in this box with you, because these people are your country now. On the good rear seat, the woman, Mrs. Aldrich, going to her husband, an army sutler at Fort Halleck, with a 5-month-old daughter who does not travel well, and who can blame her? Beside her, a minister named Brill, grey and dry as a corn husk, who reads a pocket testament in the worst of the jolting without apparent difficulty, which you privately consider the most impressive physical feat you have ever witnessed, and a mining engineer, English, named Sowerby, who has made this run 4 times and sleeps sitting bolt upright with his arms folded, like a man who has died respectably. On your bench, the backless purgatory, you in the middle, the whiskey drummer Foss on your left, who sells patent bitters and drinks his own inventory, and on your right a silent young man named Deckard in a Union Army coat, with the insignia torn off, who watches the horizon out the window with an attention that never fully relaxes, and whose right hand, you notice, is missing 2 fingers, and who you will not hear speak a full sentence until the 4th night, and when he finally does, you'll wish the circumstances were different. Facing you, the cattle buyer, Hupp, a Denver storekeeper's wife, Mrs. Pryor, returning from burying her father in Ohio, black crepe going grey with dust, and a fat, cheerful land speculator named Colonel Vance, who was never a colonel of anything, and who talks. God in heaven, how the man talks. 9 of you. 1 box, 600 miles. By noon the heat arrives, and with it the flies, and with the flies the choice that will define every waking hour of the plains crossing. Curtains up or curtains down. Curtains down, and the box becomes an oven, thick with the smell of 9 bodies, Foss's whiskey sweat, the sour milk smell of the baby, tobacco, the deep leather and horse smell of the coach itself. Curtains up, and the dust comes in. You cannot imagine this dust, so let me help you. The road is not a road. It is a braid of parallel ruts pounded through the sod by 15 years of wagons, and the topsoil along it has been ground into a flour finer than anything from a mill, in places inches deep, and it rises under 24 hooves and 4 iron tyres in a plume you can see for 10 miles, and when the wind quarter's wrong, the coach travels inside its own cloud. The dust is alkaline. It burns your eyes like weak lye. It cracks your lips by the second day, cracks them until they bleed, and then the blood cakes with more dust into a rind, and you learn to smile carefully when you smile at all. It fills the creases of your knuckles and tattoos itself there. Mrs. Aldrich drapes a wetted cloth over the baby's face, and has to re-wet it every half hour from the canteen, and you watch her ration the water between her daughter's face and her daughter's mouth, doing arithmetic no mother should do, all afternoon. Colonel Vance, curtains down, mops his neck and holds forth on the future. Mark me, this whole country will be farms in 20 years, farms and rail. The locomotive is coming, friends, and when she comes, all this. He waves a fat hand at everything, the coach, the dust, the planes, your suffering. All this will be a story you bore your grandchildren with. He's right, is the strange thing. The men are grading the Union Pacific out of Omaha this very summer. Within 4 years, the rails will meet at Promontory, and the whole Overland Stage Empire, the stations, the Jehus, the thoroughbraces, the entire howling enterprise you are riding through, will collapse into memory almost overnight. You are travelling inside a thing that is already dying in the last great years of its life, and it is the fastest, hardest, proudest thing on the plains, and none of that will save it. But that's the future. Right now there's only the heat, and the flies drowning in the sweat behind your knees, and the strap sawing your palm, and mile after mile of grass. At 2 in the afternoon you hit your first bad crossing. You hear it before you feel it. The driver's voice dropping into a low sing-song to the team, and Hup the cattle buyer takes his own advice and unclenches his jaw and braces his boot against the seat frame, and you have just enough time to copy him before the coach noses down the cut bank of a creek like a ship dropping off a wave. The front wheels hit the gravel forward with a crash that comes up through the floor, through the bench, through your hips into your teeth, the whole body of the coach slamming forward against the thoroughbraces and then whipping back, and Mrs. Pryor's hatbox comes off the rack and strikes the minister in the head, and the baby wakes screaming, and water sheets past the doors, brown and glittering, and then the far bank, and the team leans into it, 6 backs bunching, the driver's whip cracking over their ears, not touching them, never touching them. A good Jehu can flick a fly off the near leader's ear at full trot, and he is telling them with the sound alone, and the coach heaves up the bank at an angle that presses you into Foss's shoulder and levels and rolls on. Total elapsed time, perhaps 40 seconds. Your hands are shaking. "Little grasshopper creek," says Hupp, settling his tobacco. "That's one of the gentle ones. You will cross water 30 more times before Denver. You will come to know the taxonomy of crossings the way a sailor knows weather. Gravel fords that rattle your spine, mud fords where the coach sinks to the hubs and the gentlemen get out. In the polite fiction of the road, it is always phrased as getting out to lighten the load. But what it means is you, Elias, thigh-deep in a cold brown river at dusk with your shoulder against a muddy wheel, while the driver curses musically overhead, and quicksand fords, which are the ones nobody jokes about. Evening of the first day, and the light does the thing that plains light does, which no one had told you about, laying down gold across 100 miles of grass all at once, so that the whole earth seems lit from inside, and the meadowlarks start up from the fence lines where there are no fences, just the larks, and for about half an hour the misery lifts off the coach like steam, and even Foss stops drinking to look, and Mrs. Aldrich turns the baby to the window, and nobody says anything, because there is nothing to say that the country is not already saying better. Then the sun goes down, and you learn about night. They do not stop the coach at night. I want to be sure you understand this, because your body, right now in your bed, does not want to believe it. The stage runs through the dark at the same speed it runs through the day, 8, 9, 10 miles an hour, over the same ruts and cut banks and crossings, and the driver does it partly by lamplight, 2 small lamps flanking the box that throw light maybe 30 feet, and mostly by memory and by feel, by 15 years of this road living in his hands, reading the ground through 6 sets of reins the way a blind man reads a page. Inside the box, the dark is absolute. The rocking that made you sick at breakfast begins horribly to make you sleep. This is the dirty secret of the Concord. The same motion that empties your stomach eventually drugs you like laudanum, and you fight it, and you lose, and your head goes down onto the mail sack in your lap, or onto Foss's shoulder, whiskey smell and all, or Deckard's, and theirs onto yours. 9 strangers folded together in a lightless box like puppies in a basket, jolting through an ocean of black grass under more stars than you've ever seen. And every so often a wheel drops into a hole, and the whole sleeping cargo of humanity is thrown into the air as one body, and comes down grabbing and apologizing in the dark, and settles and sleeps again. Twice in the night, half dreaming, you feel the coach slow and hear voices and the chink of trace chains. Another swing station, another team, men doing hard work by lantern light while the world sleeps, and then the leap of fresh horses, and on. You wake at grey dawn with your neck bent like a hairpin, your feet dead below the ankle from the mail sacks, your mouth full of dust and the taste of old copper, and a wet patch on your shoulder where the drummer has drooled on you in brotherly trust, and the planes outside the window looking exactly, precisely, identically the same as they looked yesterday. 1 day down, 8 to go. Breakfast happens at a home station, and home stations are where the overland road shows you its true face. A swing station is just horses and 2 silent men. A home station is bigger, every 40 or 50 miles, where drivers change and where, twice a day if you're lucky, the coach stops for the sacred allotted non-negotiable span of 40 minutes so that the passengers may eat. You've been dreaming about this stop since midnight. You've constructed, in the delirium of the backless bench, an elaborate fantasy involving eggs. The station is a long, low building of cottonwood logs chinked with mud, roofed with poles and sod, out of which grass is actually growing, so that the building appears to be wearing the prairie as a hat. Inside, the floor is packed earth. The table is 2 planks on trestles, polished not by craft but by 10,000 greasy sleeves. The light comes through 2 small windows glazed with oiled paper, and the whole interior smells of exactly 3 things: tallow, burnt grease, and coffee. And after 14 hours of the coach you would not trade that smell for all the perfume in Paris. The meal is this: fried salt pork, cut thick, swimming. Beans, boiled grey. Bread they call sinkers out here. Biscuits with the density and approximate weight of river stones, served with sorghum molasses that has captured in its amber depths a museum's worth of flies. And coffee, which deserves its own sentence, because station coffee is not a beverage so much as an experience. Boiled in the same pot for days, grounds added but never removed, thick, scalding, gritty, bitter as a lawsuit, and you drink 3 cups and would fight a man for a 4th. The price is $1 or $1.50 at the remoter stations, $1 when a private soldier in the late war earned $13 a month. It is highway robbery conducted indoors. Everyone knows it, everyone pays it, because the next food is 50 miles away, and the coach leaves in 40 minutes whether you have eaten or not. You learn to eat like the old-timers eat, which is to say, fast and without inquiry. You do not ask what the meat is. Sometimes the meat is not pork. Sometimes at the far stations the meat is prairie dog, or mule that failed, or, in the good stretches, antelope, which is actually delicious and which nobody tells you about in advance because watching a greenhorn discover he's been enjoying it is one of the 4 entertainments available to station folk. You do not remark on the flies. You do not ever ask about the water, which comes from a barrel hauled from a creek, and tastes of the barrel, of sulphur, of green things, and once, unforgettably, of the dead skunk that was discovered. On investigation prompted by the passengers of the previous coach, 3 days into its residency at the bottom. You pay your $1, you eat your pork, you are, and this is the humiliating truth, grateful. There is a woman at this station, and she is the first woman you have seen working the road, the station keeper's wife, and I want you to see her, because the road runs on the backs of people like her, and history has mostly forgotten to write her down. She is perhaps 35 and looks 50. Her hands, when she sets the coffee pot down, are cracked at every knuckle, burn-scarred up both forearms in little pale crescents, the hands of someone who cooks over open fire for every coach, both directions, every day, and hauls the water and renders the tallow, and does it 100 miles from the nearest other woman. Her dress was calico once. She moves through the room of chewing men like a person moving through weather. Mrs. Aldrich asks her quietly, woman to woman, if there is fresh milk to be had for the baby. The station keeper's wife stops, looks at the baby, and her face does something complicated, and she goes out the back without a word, and comes back with a tin cup half full, warm from the cow, and will not take the coin Mrs. Aldrich offers, will not even look at it, just shakes her head once and says the only sentence you will hear from her, "Had one about that size." Then she goes back to the fire. Nobody at the table says anything. Foss, the drummer, who jokes about everything, looks into his coffee. Outside, the fresh team is jingling into the traces, and the conductor is calling time. And that is all you will ever know about her. That sentence, those hands, that half cup of milk on the plains in 1865, and you will think about her at odd moments for the rest of your life. All aboard, that's going aboard. 40 minutes, gone, back into the box. The second day is the day your body begins to understand what it has signed. The novelty of misery wears off and the accounting begins. Your tailbone first. There is a bruise blooming there that you cannot see and do not need to. Sitting is now a negotiation, and every one of the 10,000 jolts an hour lands on it like a small fist. Your knees, locked in their strange marriage with Hupp's knees, have developed a deep interior ache, the ache of joints held in one position past all reason. This strap has worn a red groove diagonal across your right palm. Your eyes, from squinting into dust and glare, feel packed with sand because they more or less are. And there is a new torment, one nobody warned you of, your kidneys. The endless vertical jarring makes your lower back throb like a tooth by mid-afternoon, and you notice that all the veterans Sowerby, Hupp, The drivers themselves wear their belts or a wound sash cinched tight around the lower back, and you ask Sowerby about it, and the Englishman opens one eye and says, "Kidney belt, dear boy. Buy a sash at Fort Kearny or piss blood by Julesburg," and closes the eye again, and at Fort Kearny you buy the sash. Fort Kearny itself rises out of the plains on the third morning, and calling it a fort flatters it. No wall, no stockade, just a scatter of frame and adobe buildings around a parade ground with the flag snapping in the endless wind. But it sits at the great junction where all the trails braid together along the Platte, and here you see the road in its full strangeness. Because you're not alone out here. The Overland Road in June of 1865 is one of the busiest highways on earth. Freight trains of massive wagons, hitched to 10 yoke of oxen apiece, crawl west with flour and hardware and whiskey. They're bullwhackers walking alongside cracking whips you can hear a mile off. Mormon emigrant companies, returned soldiers riding mules, whole families walking beside farm wagons, the children driving a milk cow, a rocking chair roped on top of everything like a throne, and telegraph poles, a single thin line of them marching beside the road from horizon to horizon, humming in the wind, carrying words from ocean to ocean at the speed of lightning past your coach, making 9 miles an hour, and sometimes, in the middle of the empty plains, that hum in the wire is the loudest sound there is, and the driver will tell you the Indians mostly leave the wire alone because they suspect, not wrongly, that the white man has trapped a spirit in it. Beyond Kearny, you enter the valley of the Platte, and the Platte becomes your companion for 300 miles, and no river was ever less worth the mileage. A mile wide and an inch deep, the saying goes, too thick to drink, too thin to plough. A vast flat braid of sandbars and shallow channels, water the colour of milked coffee, no trees, the wood all cut 15 years ago by the 49ers, so that the fuel at the stations now, and I am sorry to be the one to tell you this, but you asked what the smell was, is buffalo chips, dry dung gathered by the sackful, which burns hot and fast with a smell that is honestly not bad, a smell like burnt grass, and which cooks your dinner the whole width of Nebraska, and the buffalo themselves. On the 4th day, near midday, the coach slows, and you hear the driver say something to the conductor in a tone you haven't heard from him, almost soft, and you put your head out into the dust and the southern horizon is moving. Not a herd on the horizon moving. A brown shag carpet laid over the earth from southeast to southwest. 10 miles of it, more, drifting north toward the river in a slow grazing walk. 10,000 animals, 50,000. There is no counting. The sound of them arriving before the smell and the smell before the dust. A low continuous mutter of grunting and hoof-fall like the sea heard through a wall. And Deckard, the silent soldier, is leaning past you at the window, and even Colonel Vance has stopped talking, and the minister says, mostly to himself, "And God said, let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind," and for once the words are the right size. The driver holds the team at a walk for most of an hour along the herd's flank. He does not need to explain why you do not hurry 6 horses past 50,000 buffalo. In 15 years, almost all of them will be bones. Men will gather the bones in wagons and sell them by the ton for fertilizer along this very road. You do not know that, and I wish I didn't. You roll on. The plains change by degrees too small to see and too large to miss. The grass shorter now, the air drier, distant bluffs standing up raw and yellow, and landmarks with names the whole continent knows. Courthouse Rock, Chimney Rock standing like a factory chimney, God forgot, Scott's Bluff, each one visible for a day before you reach it and a day after you pass, so that the country teaches you a new sense of scale by force. Sowerby the engineer takes measurements of Chimney Rock with a pocket instrument for pleasure. Mrs. Pryor, the widow in dusty crape, looks at it a long time and says it is the first thing in 800 miles her father would have liked. And at night now, sometimes far off the road, points of orange light. Emigrant camps, says Hupp, not quite fast enough. Deckard looks at the lights and then at Hupp, and says nothing, and his silence says, some of them. Somewhere in these middle days you also learn the road's second climate, which is night cold, and it ambushes you precisely because the days are furnaces. The plains give back their heat the moment the sun is gone, all of it, generously, to the sky, and by 2 a.m, even in June, the air through the curtain seams has an edge like well water, and the coach interior, which at noon was an oven, becomes an ice house on wheels, and the 9 of you, who at noon were leaning away from each other's heat, migrate together in the dark by pure animal parliament. No votes taken, no words spoken, until the middle bench and the rear bench are one shivering mass under every coat, robe and shawl aboard, and the minister's carriage blanket covers 3 people who've never been introduced, and Foss's whisky breath is, at 3 a.m, at last, forgiven, because Foss is warm. You learn what the veterans carry and why. Sowerby's tweed is not a costume, it turns wind. Hupp's buffalo coat, which took up a quarter of the boot and which you privately mocked in the June heat of Atchison, appears on the 3rd night and makes him the most courted man in the coach. Mrs. Pryor has a soapstone, an actual soapstone that she has heated at every home station fire since Ohio, and it rides at the lady's feet, and its little planet of warmth is shared downward through the coach's society by strict and silent precedents. Baby first, and no man aboard would dream of the arrangement being otherwise. And you learn the roll call of things the road does to a body that nobody puts in the emigrant guides. The way your hands, gripping the strap and the window frame 10 hours a day, develop cracks at the thumb joints that open and close with every clench. Little bright mouths of pain, until the station wife's tallow becomes as necessary to you as bread. The way your lips give up entirely, the way the alkali dust infiltrates everything you own, so that your spare shirt, folded and buried in a strapped valise inside the boot, comes out on the 5th day grey at every crease, dust that has passed through leather and canvas and cotton to find you, like a debt. The way you stop hearing yourself smell, all of you, the whole coach, a fug of bodies and tobacco and milk and whiskey and a horse, that a stranger opening the door recoils from and that you, inside it, have not noticed for days. And the moment you understand this, at a home station watching a fresh passenger's face as he boards, is the moment you understand that you're no longer a fresh passenger. There is one more fear riding this road, and it is white, and I should give it its due, because Uncle Dan already told you where it ranks. Road agents, highwaymen. The express box under the driver's boot carries gold coin, bank paper, sometimes dust coming east from the mines, and everyone on the road knows it. And in the war years just past, the plains filled up with men who learned to take things at gunpoint for a living, and saw no reason to stop when the armies did. The etiquette of a road robbery is, by 1865, so well established that Hupp recites it to you like a catechism, having once stood through one on the Salt Lake Division. They stop you at a grade or a crossing, where the team is at a walk. They want the box, and the mail is federal, and mostly they leave it, because robbing the mail brings a kind of attention that even fools avoid. They ask the passengers for their pocket money, hats off, held out, and the passengers give it, because the arithmetic of a shotgun at 4 feet is not complicated, and this is why every old hand on the road carries 2 purses. The true one, sewn or booted or, like yours, stitched into a coat lining by a mother who read the newspapers, and the false one, the road purse, $10 or $15 kept loose and surrenderable, an offering to the god of grades and crossings. Hupp shows you his. It has a 5, 2 twos, and a Confederate note in it. The last included, he says, out of pure malice. You never meet a road agent. I'll tell you that now so you can ride the grades in peace tonight. The escort season and the Indian War have made this stretch. This summer, paradoxically, the worst business climate for highwaymen in years. There is too much cavalry on the road. The dangers of a road never take turns, but sometimes, mercifully, they crowd each other out. What you meet instead, on the 6th evening, is the eastbound coach. It comes up out of its own dust with its lamps already lit, and the 2 drivers do the thing the drivers always do, which is begin slowing a quarter mile out so that the coaches can pass at a walk close enough to speak, and for 2 minutes the whole Overland Line, all 600 miles of it, contracts to a single point. 2 boxes side by side in an ocean of grass going opposite ways. News crosses, water levels, grass fires, the state of the fords, which stations are short of stock. The eastbound conductor leans over and hands yours a bundle of Denver newspapers 3 days old, which is as fresh as news gets out here, and your conductor hands back Missouri papers in trade. And the passengers meanwhile stare across 4 feet of air at the passengers, at 9 faces going where you have been, sunburnt exactly where you are pale, and pale exactly where you are burnt, and a man in the eastbound window, gaunt, bright-eyed, some miner going home with whatever he is going home with, looks at your soft collar and your week of misery, and grins like a jack-o'-lantern, and calls across the gap the only greeting the road ever really has. You'll get used to it. And the whips crack, and the coaches pull apart east and west, and inside a minute is dust and your dust are 2 separate weathers a mile apart, closing on 2 different horizons, and Mrs. Pryor, watching the eastbound shrink in the window, says, quietly to no one, "That poor man thinks he's the one going the right way." And Colonel Vance laughs, and then stops because it isn't entirely a joke, and the coach rolls on into the sunset with everybody privately deciding which way the right way is. You have Denver papers now, and this matters more than you'd think, because a coach with newspapers is a different country from a coach without. Sowerby reads the mining columns aloud by the last light, or assays, mill openings, and you listen with a new hunger, because those columns are the weather report for the rest of your life. The minister takes the paper after and reads the church notices and the marriages, all of them softly, names of strangers in a town he's never seen, and when Foss asks him why, the old man says, because somewhere it is an ordinary Tuesday, and folds the page with great care, and that sentence stays in the coach after the light goes, the way some sentences do. And that night, the 6th night, is the one where you finally sleep properly sitting up, the true deep coach sleep of the veterans, 6 hours of it in 2-hour installments between team changes, head on the strap, hands folded, boots braced, and you wake in the grey before dawn, having dreamed of the farm in Ohio for the first time since Atchison, the actual smell of the spring house, your mother's voice at the foot of the stairs, and you sit in the rocking dark with the dream going off you like heat, and you understand something about distance that the map never told you. The road doesn't just take you toward a place. It takes you one swing station at a time out of another one, and there is a night on every crossing. This one was yours when the leaving becomes real, and after it the road only runs one way. The others are asleep around you, 9 breaths in the dark, and the wheels turn, and the wire hums, and far up on the box a man you cannot see keeps 6 horses on a road you cannot see, and you put your head back on the strap and let it carry you. Let me tell you now what everyone in that coach knows and no one is saying, because it is time you knew it too. 5 months before you boarded, in January of this year, 1,000 Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Sioux warriors came down on the town of Julesburg, Colorado Territory, the biggest stage station on this entire road, and burned it flat, twice. They burned the station, the warehouses, the telegraph office, the stores. They did it in answer to Sand Creek, where Colorado cavalry had ridden into a Cheyenne village flying an American flag and a white flag both, and killed whoever they caught, mostly women, children, and old men, and paraded the trophies through Denver afterward to applause. You will hear men in this coach call Sand Creek a battle. You will hear other men, including, one night quietly, Deckard, call it what the Army's own investigators called it that very summer, a massacre, foul and dastardly. Those are the words in the official report. 1865 is not later. People knew at the time. And all spring the answer has rolled up and down this road. Stations burned, stock run off, telegraph wire torn down by the mile, freighters found by the road. The Army has strung soldiers out along the Platte, and for stretches this spring the coaches only ran with cavalry escorts or not at all. And Ben Holliday is losing stock and stations and screaming at the government, and the government is paying him for his losses, because the mail, always, the mail must go through. This is the road you bought a ticket on. This is why the conductor's shotgun. This is why Deckard watches the horizon. This is why, at the stations now, you notice the stock tenders keep a rifle leaning inside the barn door, and why the corrals west of Kearney have gotten walls, sod walls with loopholes in them, and why the drivers coming east, when they pass your coach with a lifted hand, sometimes lean over and shout a few words to your driver, and your driver nods and does not pass the words back into the coach. You get your first driver change at a home station on the Platte, and the man who climbs onto the box for the night division is the one the others call Uncle Dan, and he is the finest thing on this road, and I want you to know him, because you are about to owe him your life. Dan Tripp, 50-some years old, started driving in Ohio on the National Road when he was younger than you, drove in California in the 50s, drove for the Pony Express stations before that enterprise died, and has been on this division 4 years, which means he has driven this exact 50 miles of earth, both directions, through every season, some 2,000 times. He is not large. He is quiet, with white stubble and eyes bedded in wrinkles like a turtle's, and he drinks his coffee at the station holding the cup in both hands like a small ceremony, and when he takes the 6 reins into his left hand, 3 between each pair of fingers, something happens to him that you have no better word for than this. He becomes part of a larger animal. You know this because on the 5th evening, there being for once a vacancy, the conductor lets you ride an hour on the box beside him, up in the wind above the dust, and it is the finest hour of the whole crossing. From up here the team is not 6 horses, but one creature with 24 legs, and Uncle Dan plays it the way a musician plays. A 1/4-inch shift of his wrist, and the leaders bend around a washout you never saw. A click of his tongue, and the swing pair steadies. He points out with his chin, never taking a hand from the lines. Everything. an antelope watching from a bluff, a sod house abandoned mid-build, the grave markers, and once he's pointed them out you cannot stop seeing them. Weathered boards and stone piles in the grass all along this road, thousands of them the whole way west. Cholera years mostly, he says. 49, 52. Whole road's a churchyard, son. We just drive through it quick. You ask him, because you are 19 and cannot help it, if he has ever been attacked. He's quiet for a while, working the lines, and you think he will not answer. Run from arrows twice, he says at last. Been shot at by white men more times than that. Road agents after the express box. Drunk soldiers. One fool passenger cleaning his pistol inside the coach. Put a ball through the roof and my hat. He turns his head and spits, precisely downwind. It ain't the wild men keep me up nights, boy. It's the rivers, and it's the fools. Then he says the thing you will carry the rest of your life, and he says it not grandly, but the way a man mentions weather. Everything out here is patient except people. The river's patient. The grass is patient. Cold's patient. You learn to be the patientest thing on the road, you'll die old and indoors. And he sends you back inside the box because the light is going, and night divisions are no place for greenhorns on the roof. The 6th day, you reach what is left of Julesburg. The coach comes down the South Platte in the long morning light and the driver does not stop. There's nothing to stop for, and you all crowd the windows on the north side in silence. Shah. That is the word your mind keeps handing you. A town-size stain on the plains. The station chimney standing alone out of a black rectangle. Burned wagon irons in the grass. Wheel tires lying in perfect circles with nothing left of the wheels. A safe, squat and rusted, sitting in the open where a building used to be around it, its door hanging. The new station has been rebuilt a few miles off under the guns of a fort, sod and timber, raw and ugly and alive, soldiers loafing on its walls, and the coach changes teams there inside a walled corral for the first time on the journey, gates shut behind you, and nobody, not even Colonel Vance, has anything to say about the future for a full half hour. At that station, the meal is beans and coffee, and the bread is short, because the supply wagons are running under escort now, and there is a list nailed by the door, names in pencil, station men and freighters, this division, this spring, and at the bottom someone has written, small. God keep the boys on the road. You stand and read it with your hat in your hands and your $1.50 in your pocket, feeling like a strange and trivial thing. West of Eulersburg, the coach leaves the emigrant swarm behind. The road forks and forks again, traffic thinning, and now for hours at a time yours is the only dust on the earth. The country goes harder, sagebrush and sand bluffs, the Platte shrunken to a chain of pools, the sun a hammer by 10 in the morning, and the crossing settles into its final purest form, a small wooden world of 9 people, alone, moving through an immensity that has recently and specifically demonstrated what it can do to small wooden worlds. And it is here, in the 7th night, in the black hours between 2 swing stations with names you will never learn, that Deckard finally talks. It starts because the baby will not stop crying. Heat rash, the dust, the endless motion. The poor creature has been fighting sleep for 2 days, and Mrs. Aldrich is beyond apology, beyond exhaustion, whispering to her daughter in the dark with a fraying voice, and Foss the drummer, whiskey brave, mutters something ugly under his breath about some people and the decency to wait for the railroad. The dark goes very still, and Deckard's voice comes out of it, quiet, even, the first full sentences you have heard from him in 7 days. At Chattanooga, there was a man in my company cried every night, grown man. Whole regiment could hear him, and nobody said one word to him, because he'd stood where he was put all day at Chickamauga, while the line came apart around him. A pause. The coach sways, drops, catches. Crying's just the noise courage makes when it's resting. Let the child alone. Foss does not answer. The baby, with the perversity of babies, chooses that moment to sleep, and in the morning Foss, hungover and shamefaced, produces from his sample case a stick of horehound candy and offers it to Mrs. Aldrich for when the little one's older, and she takes it, and that is how apologies are made on the middle bench of a Concord coach. You are 2 days from Denver. Your body has stopped keeping accounts. The aches have merged into a single continuous fact, like a sound you have stopped hearing. Your face in the mirror at the last home station belonged to a stranger, burnt umber to the collar line, white above the hat line, eyes red-rimmed, lips cracked and shining with the tallow the station wife gave you for them. You have learned to sleep sitting up. You have learned to eat anything, drink anything, and be grateful. You have learned that Hup's knees and your knees have reached an understanding independent of their owners. You have almost started to believe the road is only misery. The road is about to correct you. The 8th day begins wrong, and it begins wrong in a way so small you almost miss it. The coach rolls into the morning swing station, a place called Beaver Creek, or maybe it was Bijou. The names have started sliding together, and the fresh team is not standing ready in the yard. That is all. That is the whole omen. In 8 days and some 50 station changes, you've never once arrived to an empty yard. The machine of the road has been so perfect, so relentless, that you stopped seeing it. The way you stopped seeing your own heartbeat. And now the yard is empty, and the silence where the jingle of waiting harness should be is the loudest thing on the plains. The driver of this division is a younger man than Uncle Dan, a Missourian named Cole with a red beard and a habit of singing to his wheelers, and Cole stops singing. The conductor is down off the box before the coach fully stops, shotgun cradled, and a stock tender comes out of the barn, only one, and there is a conversation in the yard that you cannot hear, but you can see it. You can read the whole thing in shoulders and hats. The tender pointing west, the conductor's boot digging at the dirt, Cole leaning down from the box, and all 3 men looking at the same moment, at the same empty horizon. Then the conductor walks back and puts his head in the window and gives you the news in the flat, unhurried voice that men out here use precisely in proportion to how bad the news is. Folks, team that was coming down to meet us ain't come down. Rider from the next station up says there was smoke on Sand Creek Fork yesterday evening. He lets that sit. He does not say which kind of smoke, because there is only one kind of smoke that gets reported by Rider. We'll take grain here, water the team we got, and push through to Godfrey's on the same stock. It's 19 miles. They're good animals, but it'll be slow, and it'll run us into dark, and I'll ask the gentlemen to keep their arms where they can find them. Keep their arms where they can find them. You watch the coach reorganize itself around that sentence. Hup the cattle buyer takes a long-barreled Colt out of his valise, checks the caps with his thumb, and puts it not back in the valise but in his coat. Sowerby the engineer produces, of all things, a small English revolver from somewhere in his tweed, examines it with faint distaste, and holds it in his lap like a prayer book. Colonel Vance has a pocket pistol, nickel-plated, absurd, and his hands are shaking slightly, and for once the man has nothing to say. The minister Brill folds his hands over his testament. Mrs. Pryor moves nothing but her eyes. Mrs. Aldrich pulls the baby closer, and you see her look once quickly at the door latch, and then at the floor of the coach, measuring it, and you realise she is figuring where her daughter goes if it comes to lying down, and something in your chest turns over. And Deckard reaches under the middle bench, into the bedroll he has kept there for 8 days, and unwraps an army carbine, a Spencer, short and heavy and worn silver at the edges, and he does it without hurry or drama, and he loads it through the stock 7 shots, and sets it upright between his knees, and rests his 3-fingered hand on the muzzle, and goes back to watching the horizon. And you have your brother's letter, and $300 sewn into a coat, and a clasp knife suitable for cutting apples. Hupp sees your face. He leans forward across your interlocked knees and says quietly, so it stays between your bench and his, "Most times, son, smoke is just smoke. Grass fires, somebody's haystack. I've rode this road 11 times and never been shot at once." He settles back, works his tobacco. "But if it ain't just smoke, you get down on that floor with the ladies, and you stay there, and you leave the rest to them that's paid for." Nobody has paid for it. That is the thing you understand suddenly and completely, in the hot rocking box with the grain sacks thumping a board overhead. The conductor is paid $60 a month. Coal may be $75. The stock tender staying behind alone at this station tonight, with his 1 rifle and his sod walls, is paid less than either. Ben Holliday, who owns every plank and strap and mule of this enterprise, is at this moment in an office in New York or a parlour in Washington, and the mail contract pays him close to $1 million a year. And the distance between that million and this yard, this silence, this one man watering 6 tired horses under an empty sky, is the entire history of the American frontier in one arithmetic. The team goes back into the traces, the same 6. Their necks are dark with old sweat, and the offside leader is favouring nothing yet, but standing with her weight arranged carefully, the way a tired person stands, and Cole walks the line of them before he climbs up, touching each one on the shoulder, saying something to each, and you cannot hear the words, but you have had a mother and you know the tone. 19 miles, on used horses, into evening. All aboard! The first 10 miles pass in a silence you could stack like cordwood. The road here runs up the long shallow trough of the South Platte. Sand hills on the left standing in rows like waves that forgot to fall, and every one of those hills could hide 100 riders. And every one of them is only a hill, and the difference between those 2 facts is a country you now live in. The coach travels slower than you have ever felt it travel. Cole nursing the team, holding them to a soft trot, saving them, and the slowness is its own torment. Because your body has learned the road's rhythms, and this rhythm is wrong. This is the rhythm of a thing hoarding its strength. You catch yourself doing what Deckard does, sweeping the country. Left window, right window, the notch of the road ahead through the front boot. There is a rider on a ridge to the south at one point. A single figure, motionless, a mile off, and every soul in the coach sees him at the same instant, and no one says anything, and he watches you the whole time. It takes the coach to cross his front, 5 minutes, 10, and then the ridge folds and he is gone, and you will never know. Antelope hunter, soldier, scout, boy on a pony watching the strange rolling box. You will never know, and the not knowing rides with you all afternoon like a 10th passenger. Around 5 the sky begins its own campaign. You have watched thunderheads build over the plains every afternoon for a week. big white anvils standing off politely to the north or south, somebody else's weather. This one does not stand off. It comes up out of the southwest ahead of you, blue-black at the base, its top catching the late sun in a way that would be beautiful if it were happening to someone else. And the air goes green and still, and the grass turns pale side up, and the temperature drops so fast you feel it move through the coach like a hand. Cole is talking to the team continuously now, and the team does not like it. Ears swivelling, the tired mare tossing her head, because horses know, horses always know, and the first thunder arrives not as sound, but as a pressure in your back teeth. Godfrey's is 4 mile on, the conductor calls down, and the wind arrives in the middle of his sentence and takes the rest of it away. I need you to understand what a plain storm is, in a wooden box, on used horses, in Indian country, at dusk. The dust hits first, a brown wall of it, the whole surface of the road picked up and thrown, and the curtains, hastily dropped and buckled, belly inward like sails and shriek at their fastenings. Then the temperature falls off a cliff, 20 degrees in 2 minutes, sweat going cold on your body all at once. Then the rain. Except it is not rain at first. It is hail, small, then not small, drumming on the coach roof in a roar that swallows all speech, the horses flinching under it, and then the hail turns to water, water in ropes, in sheets, the road dissolving under the wheels into gumbo, that plains mud with the character of wet mortar, and the light, what light there is, coming now only in the lightning, which is continuous, which shows you the inside of the coach and 8 white faces in stuttering blue photographs. The baby is screaming and you cannot hear her. You can see her mouth. Mrs. Aldrich has her wrapped inside her own shawl, inside her own body, bent over her like a wall, and the minister has moved, you notice, has put his dry corn-husk self between the woman and the windward door, an old man's body offered as weather stripping, his lips moving, and the coach is swaying now in a new way. Not the road's sway, but the wind's, the whole box shouldering and slewing on its leather braces, and through it all, through all of it, you can feel in the floor, in your locked knees, in the strap sawing your palm, the team still pulling. 6 exhausted animals leaning into a black wall of water, because a man above them in the roaring dark is asking them to, with his hands in a language of leather, and they love him, or trust him, or whatever the word is for what a horse does, and they pull. That is the true engine of the Overland Mail, and no one ever put it on a poster. Not the Concord's white oak, not Holiday's million, but that, the pulling. And then the lightning gives you one long, generous, half-second photograph of what is ahead, and in the blue-white flash you see Godfrey's station, you see the corral wall, you see the barn, and you see that where the station house should be, there is a chimney standing alone in a black rectangle with steam rising off it in the rain. The coach comes into the station yard at a walk, and the storm chooses that moment, with the terrible timing of weather, to begin passing over, the hail gone, the rain slackening to a hard, steady fall, the thunder moving off east to trouble somebody else, and in the afterlight, that low grey-green glow, a storm leaves behind it like a tide line. You all see it plainly. Godfrey's station burned this morning or last night, not in the storm. The storm came later and killed the last of it. The main house is gone to the sills, black timber ends hissing faintly in the rain, the chimney standing with its hearth still in it, a kettle still hanging on the crane over ashes, and that detail, the kettle, is the one your mind fastens on and cannot release, because someone hung that kettle expecting supper. The barn stands. Barns are sod-walled out here for exactly this reason. The corral wall stands sod and cedar posts, though the gate is down and the corral is empty, and the emptiness of the corral is a fact with arithmetic in it, that Cole and the conductor are already doing. No stock. The relay stock is run off. The team you have, the team that has now come 31 miles on grain and heart, is the only team there is. Stay in the coach, the conductor says, and his voice has no flatness left in it. He and Cole and Deckard. Deckard is simply out the door with his Spencer before anyone can speak to the question of whether passengers ought to move through the yard in the rain, and you watch them through the streaming window, 3 dark shapes against the black ruin, checking the barn, checking behind the corral wall, moving the way men move when they have done this kind of thing before, and there is a long minute and another, and then a sound comes from the barn that stands every hair on your body upright before you understand it. A voice calling out, alive. They bring him to the coach wrapped in a saddle blanket, and the passengers make room the way people do, all at once and awkwardly, and so for the last miles of this night there are 10 of you in the box, and the 10th is a stock tender named Whitaker, 19 years old, your age exactly. With a burned left forearm he got pulling harness out of the tack room, and a voice that has been screamed down to a whisper. The story comes out of him in pieces, between his teeth chattering, while Mrs. Pryor, the silent widow, cleans the burn with water and binds it with a strip of her own black hem, working with a steadiness that tells you she has dressed wounds before, and you all lean in to hear him over the rain. Raiders hit the station at first light. He never got a clean count, a dozen, maybe 20. The other tender, an older man named Swede Nilsson, was at the corral when they came. Whitaker was in the barn. He got into the root cellar under the tack room and pulled the door and lay in the dark listening to them take the stock and fire the house, and he stayed there through the morning, through the afternoon, through the storm, 10 hours in a hole the size of a grave, and when he finally came up, the station was ashes and Swede was gone. Not dead in the yard. Gone. Taken, or run, or lying somewhere out in 100 square miles of wet sage, and Whitaker's whisper cracks apart entirely on the word gone, and he is, you remind yourself again, 19, and he has spent this day in ways that will visit him at night for 50 years. Deckard puts a hand on the boy's shoulder, doesn't say anything, leaves it there. Up on the box there is a conference happening in the rain, Cole and the conductor, and the arithmetic they are doing is the worst arithmetic on the road, and because the window is cracked for air you hear most of it, and I will lay it out for you the way it lays itself out for them. They cannot stay. The station is a beacon of wet char with no food, no stock, one defensible barn, and whoever burned it knows exactly what is here, and may be inclined to come back for the coach, whose schedule they also know, because everyone on this road, friend and enemy, knows the schedule. The schedule is the whole point of the road. They cannot go back. Beaver Creek is 19 miles behind, and the team has 31 miles in its legs already. They can go forward. The next home station, Valley Station, sits 14 miles on, under the guns of a company of Ohio cavalry with wool, stock, food and a telegraph. 14 miles at night, on a road running with storm water, behind 6 horses that have already given everything polite that horses can be asked to give. And between here and there, 6 miles on, is the crossing at Cedar Ford, which is a gravel-bottom nothing in dry weather, and which tonight after this storm will be running brown and fast and full of the upstream country's opinion. You hear Cole say, "She'll be over her banks." You hear the conductor say, "Mail's due in Denver Thursday." And you hear Cole answer after a silence with the whole night in it. And this is the sentence you will tell your grandchildren, the one that summarizes the entire insane, magnificent, doomed enterprise of the Overland Stage in 9 words. Well, the mail don't know what Thursday is. He climbs down. He goes along the team in the rain one more time, and this time he takes longer, and at the head of the tired off-leader, the mare, he stands for a moment with his forehead against her cheekbone, and whatever passes there is not in English. Then he grains them from the barn's saved sacks, all they can safely take, and Deckard and Hupp and you, yes, you, because your hands demanded to be given something to do or lose their reason, carry water in a hissing lantern's light, bucket after bucket from the station well to 6 velvet mouths, and the mare drinks with her eyes half shut and her nostrils going like a bellows, and up close, your palm flat on her wet neck. You can feel the heartbeat, big as a fist knocking, and you are ashamed suddenly and completely of every complaint your tailbone has filed for 8 days. They put Whitaker inside, in your place on the middle bench. You ride on the roof. The conductor puts it as a request, and it is not one. They want weight up top rearranged, and they want another pair of eyes, and Deckard is already up there among the lashed mail sacks with his carbine, and so you climb the front wheel in the rain, and wedge yourself into the iron rail among the mail of the United States, and this is how you make the run to Cedar Ford. 19 years old, soaked to the bone, $300, and a dead brother's letter against your ribs, flat on your belly on top of a swaying stagecoach in the last of a thunderstorm, watching the black country for shapes, while below you a Missourian sings, low and steady, to 6 horses at the end of their strength. He sings. That is the thing. Through the dark and the rain, mile after mile, Cole sings to the team. Old river songs, hymn tunes, nonsense. His voice never rising and never stopping, and the ears of the wheelers stay turned back toward him like weather vanes, and the coach rolls at a slow, sane, sustainable trot through country where every shadow has teeth, and you understand, lying up there in the wet with your heart going, that this is what courage mostly looks like. Not the Spencer, the singing. Twice things move in the dark. Once close on the left, a rush and clatter that stops every heart on the coach, and Deckard's carbine swings and holds and does not fire, and it is antelope, a dozen of them, storm-spooked, flowing across the road like grey water, and once, far to the north, a light. A point of fire on the plains where no station is, burning steady, and Deckard watches it for a long time over his sights, and then puts his cheek back down on the mail and says to you or to himself, "Too far to matter. It burns behind you for miles. Nobody ever finds out. The road is full of lights nobody ever finds out about." And then the sound of the Ford arrives, out of the dark ahead, before you see anything at all. It does not sound like a creak. It sounds like weather. A low, wide, tearing hiss with a grinding underneath it. The grinding of a stream bed rearranging its gravel, of drowned brush rolling, and Cole stops singing, and eases the team to a halt on the last rise above the crossing, and in the light of the 2-coach lamps, 30 feet of light and no more, you see Cedar Ford at 11 o'clock on the worst night of your life. The creek is over its banks, exactly as promised. What is normally 40 feet of shin-deep gravel is 100 feet of moving brown, seamed and boiling, carrying storm trash down its middle, sagebrush, a fence rail, once a whole drowned cottonwood limb turning slowly like something swimming, and the far bank is a low black line that the lamps barely reach, and the near bank is dissolving under the water's edge in soft collapsing bites even as you watch. The conductor is down, sounding the edge with a pole from the boot. Cole stands on the box, reading the water for a long time, longer than he has taken over anything on this road, and you all wait. 10 souls, 6 horses, 2,500 pounds of the United States mail, in the little globe of lamplight with the dark pressing in, while one man in a wet hat decides everything. Current's heavy, but she's on gravel, the conductor calls up. 2.5 foot at the pole, maybe 3 in the channel. Rising or falling? A pause. The pole again. Falling. Just. Cole looks at the water another moment. Then he sits down, unhurried, and gathers his lines, and his voice comes back to the coach, flat as Sunday. Everybody inside gets on the upstream benches, ladies and the little one highest. Gentlemen, don't none of you touch a door handle unless I say the word, and if I say the word, you go out the upstream side and you hold the coach, not each other. A beat. Boys on top, lie flat and hold the rail. If she swims, she'll swim crooked. If she swims, you lie flat, you hold the rail. The iron is cold as a well chain, and your hands have stopped feeling like your hands. And Cole clicks his tongue, twice, gently, like a man waking a child, and 6 horses walk down into the flood. The first thing the water does is take the sound away. All the small noises you have lived inside for 8 days, the axle squeal, the door rattle, the tick of gravel off the tyres, all of it is erased at once by the flood's wide hiss, and the coach becomes strangely quiet, a quiet full of enormous pressure. And the second thing the water does is lean on the coach. You feel it come up through the frame, a steady sideways insistence, the whole vehicle heeling 1/2 degree downstream like a ship taking wind, and under you the wheels are no longer rolling so much as feeling, dropping from stone to stone with soft chalky knocks that you feel in your breastbone where it is pressed against the mail. The horses are into their bellies. You can see them in the lamplight ahead and below, 6 dark backs and the water shouldering white against each one's upstream side, and they have stopped being tired. That is the strange grace of it. Something older than tiredness has come up in them. The mare has her head low and forward, reading the bottom through her feet, and Cole has stopped even the clicking now, his hands doing everything, keeping their heads quartered upstream so the current helps hold them against the bottom instead of scooping them off it. And the coach crawls foot by foot down the slope of the ford toward the channel. Halfway, the water at the wheel hubs. Now, over them, a thin sheet of it finds the floor of the coach. You hear it arrive inside, hear Mrs. Pryor's sharp intake and the minister's voice, low and even, going through the 23rd Psalm at conversational speed, not performing it, just laying the words down one after another like planks, and the baby, God bless her contrary soul, is silent, wide awake and silent, as if even 5 months of life on earth is enough to know this is a listening time. Then the channel. The front of the coach drops, a foot more. The team suddenly chest deep and the current takes hold of the coach body in earnest, and the whole world slews. The rear end walks downstream, gravel rolling under the tyres, the coach swinging like a compass needle, and on the roof you're looking suddenly not at the far bank but down the throat of the flood itself, the lamps throwing their little light on brown water going away fast into the dark, and there is a heartbeat, too, where everything hangs in the balance of physics, 2,500 pounds against a river's shoulder, and you hear Cole's voice for the only time all crossing rise above the water, one syllable, not to you. Hup! and the leaders lunge. And the swing pair lunges into their collars a half beat behind, and the wheelers and the coach jerks forward off the sliding gravel onto firmer bottom, and the swing of the rear end checks and stops and comes back, and the front wheels find the rising slope of the far side, and then it is simply pulling. Brutal, wonderful, ordinary pulling. Water pouring off the coach in sheets, the horses climbing the submerged bank in surges, each surge slamming you against the rail, and then the noise of the flood is behind you instead of below you, and the wheels are knocking on wet gravel, then mud, then grass, and the coach stands streaming on the far bank of Cedar Ford with steam coming off 6 horses into the lamplight, and inside the box someone is laughing, high and helpless, and it is Colonel Vance, and nobody minds, and Foss the drummer is pounding on the ceiling, on the underside of the roof beneath you, whooping, and Deckard, flat beside you on the mail, lets his forehead down onto his sleeve for one long breath, and that is the only crack in him you will ever see. Cole sets the brake, climbs down into the mud, and walks the line of his team in the rain-washed dark, and this time he stops at every single head, all 6, and takes each dripping muzzle in his 2 hands for a moment, and to the tired mare, the off-leader, you hear him say, in the tone other men keep for churches, "Ain't you something? Ain't you just something?" The last 8 miles to Valley Station pass like a dream after fever. The rain quits entirely. The clouds tear open in the west and drag their skirts away, and the plain sky does the thing it does after storms, goes impossibly deep, rinsed, crowded with stars down to the very grass, and the road runs firm along the high ground, and the team, knowing somehow what horses always know, that the barn is ahead, finds one more trot in the bottom of themselves and holds it. And nobody on the coach says much, because you have all just been handed the rest of your lives, and it takes a while to know where to put a thing like that. Valley Station comes up out of the dark at 1 in the morning as a scatter of orange window light, and then a challenge shouted from the wall, "Who comes there?" And the conductor's answer, "Overland Mail, eastbound and westbound both nights late, and glad of it." And then gates, actual gates, swinging, and a corral full of cavalry mounts shifting and whickering at your blown team, and soldiers' faces in lamplight, and hands, so many hands, reaching up to help the ladies down, taking Whittaker off between 2 troopers to the surgeon, catching the mail sacks Deckard throws, and you come down the front wheel on legs that have forgotten their trade, and stand for a moment holding the tyre, the actual iron tyre, warm even now while the yard turns gently around you. They telegraphed the division agent about Godfrey's from the station's little key that very hour. You hear it clicking through the wall while you eat, and this is 1865, so understand what that clicking is. The news of a burned station going down a wire through the same dark you just crossed at 9 miles an hour, arriving in Denver and Atchison, and by morning relays, New York, faster than the smoke of Godfrey's could blow to the next county. The oldest kind of night on earth outside the walls, and the newest thing in the world tapping through them. You fall asleep to it, because, yes. At Valley Station, for the first time in 8 days they hold the coach. Not for the passengers. Never flatter yourself. Not for the passengers. The team is finished. The relay stock has to be brought in and sorted come light. The division agent has ordered the next stretch run by daylight with an escort until further notice. And so the mail, the sacred mail, the mail that don't know what Thursday is, waits in a locked room under a soldier's boots until dawn, and the passengers inherit the delay the way passengers inherit everything on this road, incidentally. They give the women the station keeper's own room. The men get the floor of the main hall, a buffalo robe apiece, feet to the banked fire. And I want to spend a moment here, because this is a story for sleep on what it is to lie down. You have not been horizontal in 8 days. Your body has forgotten the trick of it. You lower yourself onto a buffalo robe on a packed clay floor that would have counted in your Ohio life as a hardship story to dine out on, and the floor comes up under you, the whole length of you, shoulder blade and hip and heel, and it does not move. That is the miracle. It does not sway, drop, catch. It just holds you, the way the ground has held every tired creature since the world was made, and somewhere in the dark hall Hup is already snoring like a sawmill, and the fire ticks, and a horse stamps once out in the corral, and the last thing you notice before 9 days of debt collect all at once is that you can still feel the road in your body, the phantom rocking, sway, drop, catch. Your inner ear faithfully sailing a coach that is standing still in a locked yard, and they say it takes a week on solid ground before that stops, and they are right, and it is almost in the moment before sleep takes you like a flood takes a fence rail, almost pleasant. You sleep 11 hours. Nobody wakes you. It is the greatest luxury you will ever be given by another human being, and it costs the Overland Stage Line nothing, and it is worth more than the ticket. You wake at Valley Station past noon to the smell of actual bread, yeast bread, rising, because the station keeper's wife here bakes on Thursdays, and the world has decided to be kind, and you lie on the buffalo robe for a while, in the outrageous luxury of not being required to exist yet, listening to the yard, harness being mended, a farrier's hammer going in patient triplets, a trooper singing badly, and when you finally come out blinking into the light, the tired mare is standing at the corral rail in the sun with her lower lip hanging in the manner of a horse profoundly off duty, and you go over, and she takes half an apple off your palm with immense condescension, and the two of you stand there a while, veterans together, saying nothing the way veterans do. While the coach waits for its escort, the delay does what delays on the road always do. It turns the station into a parliament, and the talk turns to the road itself. And this is where you hear the winter stories, and you should hear them too, because you're crossing in June, in the merciful season, and you ought to know what this same box is in January. The soldiers and the station men trade them like coins. The winter of '63, when the mercury on this division went to 30 below and stayed, and the coaches ran anyway, because the mail, always the mail and the passengers, rode wrapped to the eyes in buffalo robes, with heated stones at their feet going cold by the second hour, and the drivers, who could not wrap their hands because their hands were the coach, drove in fur mittens over wool gloves over grease. And even so, this is the detail that stays with you. The company kept spare drivers at the home stations in the worst weeks because a man's hands would be done, simply done, after one 15-mile division, and there are jihas on this line missing finger joints as other trades lose sawdust. And they show them the way farmers show weather scars, without complaint and without modesty either. Snow, they tell you, was never the killer. Wind was the killer. Ground blizzards, the sky clear blue above and the world below the fence tops a roaring white river. The road erased entire, and the drivers navigating by compass points of pure memory, by the feel of the ruts through the wheels, by counting the minutes between landmarks they could not see, and mostly, they will tell you plainly, by giving the leaders their heads, because a horse can smell a station through a storm that a man cannot see his own team through. And there are men alive on this division, more than one, who owe the fact to a leader who turned off the lost road on her own judgment and put her nose against a stable door. and the passengers of January. The stories are shorter and quieter. The ones who drank to keep warm, which is the one thing you must never do, and slept, which is the second thing. A coach on the Laramie division found stopped and drifted over. Team standing patient in the traces. Driver frozen upright on the box with the lines still correctly wound in his dead hands, and the passengers inside alive. Everyone, because they had done in extremity what the coach had been teaching them all along, piled together into one heap of humanity under every robe aboard and shared their heat like bread. The box protects its own, an old trooper says, if its own have the sense to huddle. He says it looking into his coffee. Nobody asks him which coach he was on. So understand you crossing in June with your sunburn and your cracked lips and your complaints. You are riding the road in its silk season. The same schedule, the same stations, the same mail ran through the whole turning year. Spring floods that moved the fords 100 yards overnight. Summer that killed stock with heat and bad water. Autumn prairie fires that came down on the road as a standing wall of orange with its own wind. Drivers judging the flame gaps at a gallop, and then the great white lid of winter clamping down over all of it. And through every season of every year, twice a day, both directions, the little wooden worlds went through, because a nation has decided its two halves would speak to each other daily, and had hired men at $75 a month, and horses at any price, and made it so. And there has maybe never been a machine built of so much flesh and weather and stubbornness before or since. That is what you're riding. That is what is standing in the corral in the sun with its lip hanging, condescending to your apple. The escort forms up at 3. The fresh team goes in, 6 new strangers of horseflesh. And Cole, who's riding through to Denver on the box as company for the new driver. His own division ended, but his coach, he says, not delivered, walks the team once out of pure habit, and the passengers board in the old order without a word. Hup's knees and your knees finding each other like partners at a dance, and the gates open, and the last afternoon and the last night of the great crossing begin. And here is what the last night of a long road is like, in case yours is still ahead of you. It is the night the box turns talkative. Something about ending loosens people. Colonel Vance, of all men, tells a true story, an actually true one. You can hear the difference the way you can hear a cracked bell, about failing at storekeeping in 3 towns in Illinois before he understood that his talent was not for goods, but for talk. And the coach, which has endured 9 days of his talk, forgives him everything in 1 minute of his truth. Mrs. Pryor speaks about her father, just a little, his orchard, his opinions on the pruning of it, and it is not sad. It is the first unsad thing she has said in 900 miles. And that is how you know the road has done for her what roads sometimes do. Foss confesses that the bitters cure nothing, which surprises no one, and that he sends money to a sister in Cairo, Illinois, which surprises everyone. The minister recites, at Mrs. Aldrich's shy request, not scripture but Wordsworth, in the rolling dark, from memory, an old dry voice laying out lines about a light that never was on sea or land, while the actual starlight of the actual Colorado Territory came in through the curtain gaps, and the baby slept, and the wheels turned, and you would not trade your seat, your backless, bruising, middle bench seat, for a throne. You even sleep. And when you wake, there's a grey line on the world's left-hand edge, and the smell through the curtains has cottonwood and river and wood smoke in it, and the coach is running well and fast on a good graded road. And somewhere ahead, under the paling stars, 40 miles or 30 or 20, is the city at the foot of the mountains and everything after. One more day, the last one. and the mountains are about to stand up out of the earth and change the size of everything you thought you knew. The last day begins with a fresh team, a cavalry corporal and 4 troopers riding flank, and a piece of news that goes through the coach like warmth. A wood hauler came in at dawn from the west road, and he'd passed a man walking the river brush toward the fort, barefoot, half naked, sun-cooked, and alive, and answering to the name of Nielsen. Swede got into the willows when the raid came and went to ground like a sensible Swede and walked out. Whitaker, hearing it in the surgeon's room, is reported by the trooper who told him to have cried like a pump handle, and there is no man in the coach, none, who says a word against him for it, and Deckard says quietly to the window, "Noise courage makes when it's resting," and that is the end of that. The road runs southwest now, following the South Platte upstream toward its own beginnings, and the country begins subtly and then insistently to tilt. You have been climbing in truth since the Missouri River. The entire plain's a ramp so gradual that in 600 miles you never once felt it, and Atchison sits at about 800 feet, and you are now above 4,000, and the air has been quietly changing under you the whole way. Thinner, drier, sharper in the nose, the nights colder, the light harder edged, and Sowerby the engineer, who measures things for love, tells you the figure, and Colonel Vance says he can feel the altitude in his blood and is contradicted by everyone. And then, in the middle of the afternoon, on a long swell of prairie that is no different from 10,000 long swells of prairie before it, the driver, without being asked, without slowing down, lifts his whip and points ahead and to the right and says one word, "There." At first you honestly do not see it. Your eyes have spent 9 days learning that the western horizon is a flat line, and they insist on reporting a flat line with some low clouds along it. Pale, blue-white, oddly still. Then the clouds refuse to move, and your eyes, all at once, correct themselves, and the bottom drops out of your sense of scale, and you understand that you're looking at the Rocky Mountains. They stand along the whole western edge of the world. 100 miles of them visible at one glance, 150. Snow on the high country in June, blue rank behind blue rank going back and up until rock becomes sky by agreement rather than boundary, and one great peak standing north like a sentinel, and another south, and between them a wall, a permanent continental dismissive wall, and the coach, your whole roaring, jolting, storm-fording, mile-eating world of a coach, is a beetle crossing a table toward it. Everyone crowds the right-hand windows. The baby's held up to see, and looks instead at Foss's moustache, which is fair. Mrs. Pryor looks for a long time and says nothing, and her chin is not quite steady. And you think of the letter against your ribs, because your brother saw this exact wall, from this road, from one of these swells 2 years ago, going out full of plans, and somewhere in that blue rampart is the gulch where his claim is, and the ground where he is. And for the first time since Ohio, the two facts sit down together in your chest, the grave and the claim, the price and the prize, and the mountains are so much bigger than both that something in you unclenches that has been clenched since Chillicothe. The country does not care, and there is a mercy in that. You will have to make it mean something yourself. That is what the wall says, standing there with its snow in June. That's the elevated view on this road, by the way. Other journeys give you a hilltop, a cathedral tower, a palace roof. The Overland Road gives you this. The moment the Rockies stand up out of the plains, and every diary, every letter, every memoir of this trail, and I have read a great many, stops at this moment and reaches for words, and most of them land on the same plain sentence. And I will give it to you as they wrote it. We saw the mountains today. Everything else they crossed, they described. The mountains, they only announced. Some things you don't describe. You just tell people you were there. The last miles into Denver run through a country visibly deciding to become a place. Ranches now, actual fenced hay meadows along the river bottoms, then market gardens, then the road thickening with traffic, or wagons coming down from the hills, hay wagons, a milk cart, riders, and the smell changes, wood smoke and cut hay and cattle pens, and, underneath, sawdust. The whole town smells faintly of fresh-cut lumber, because half of it is at any given moment being built or rebuilt. Denver having burned in 63 and flooded in 64 and shrugged and carried on both times. And then there are streets with names, brick going up 2 stories, glass windows with gold lettering, a newspaper office, the flag over a mint, actual pavement of a sort, boys running alongside the coach shouting, and the driver takes the team up to a spanking trot for the finish, because every driver on earth finishes at a trot with his hat set right. It is the oldest law of the trade, and the Concord rolls up 15th Street, trailing 650 miles of dust like a comet's tail, and swings and stops, dead level, gentle as a handshake, in front of the Overland Stage Office, Denver City, Colorado Territory, 9 days and some hours out of Atchison, Kansas. And for a moment, one strange held moment, nobody moves. 9 days you have prayed for this box to stop, and now it has stopped, and you all sit there, the 10 of you, Whitaker included, riding the last division bandaged and fed at the company's grudging expense, in the sudden ringing stillness, looking at each other in the good afternoon light through the settling dust, and what is in the coach in that moment has no correct name, but you will recognize it decades later when other men speak of their regiments. Then the door opens from outside and the world comes in. The goodbyes take 10 minutes and last the rest of your life. Mrs. Aldrich, waiting for the Fort Halleck connection, puts the baby into your arms while she gathers her bundles, just hands her over as if you were kin, and the baby, veteran of the same crossing as you, equal in miles, looks up at you with river-coloured eyes and pronounces judgment in a syllable, and you will remember the weight of her longer than the weight of anything else you carried on that road. The minister shakes your hand in both of his and tells you to write your mother tonight, not tomorrow, and you do. Hup the cattle buyer unlocks his knees from yours for the last time. 600 miles of enforced marriage dissolved on a plank sidewalk, and looks almost bereft, and covers it by telling you what a beef steer fetches in Denver, and you have no use for the information and remember it verbatim forever. Foss tries to sell the assembled company a farewell bottle of bitters and is jeered with love. Colonel Vance is met by 2 men in good coats and becomes before your eyes, in one breath, the large public personage he was always rehearsing, and winks at you over their shoulders as he goes. And Deckard shoulders his bedroll and his wrapped Spencer, and stands a moment, and you ask him, because it is the last chance where he's headed. He looks at the mountains which from the street stand up at the ends of the cross streets, like something leaning in to listen. "Someplace quiet," he says. And then, because you carried water with him at a burned station and lay beside him on the mail through the worst night of your life, he adds the second half, which you understand is the true half. Some place that don't need me for anything. He touches his hat brim to you with his 3-fingered hand, and walks up 15th Street into the crowd, and the crowd takes him the way the ridge took the watching rider entirely and forever. You stand on the sidewalk with your valise, finely excavated from under the mail, in a town roaring with saloons and hammering with construction, 40 miles from your brother's grave and your brother's ground, with your legs still riding a phantom coach, sway, drop, catch, and a coach agent is already crying tomorrow's departures. Central City, Black Hawk, Daily Line, through by evening, and you turn your head and it hits you, and you laugh out loud alone on a Denver sidewalk like a lunatic. 40 more miles. Up a canyon road they say makes the plains crossing look like a church aisle. By Stagecoach. You buy the ticket. Of course you buy the ticket. It's the only way there. And that, right there, is the entire dirty secret of stagecoach travel across the West. The one under all the others, under the dust and the sinkers and the kidney belts and the burned stations. The secret is that everyone knew. Every passenger who paid a half-year's wage to be jolted, starved, frozen, baked, terrified, and humiliated for 9 days knew, more or less, what they were buying, because Mark Twain had told them, and the newspapers had told them, and their own cousins had written home and told them. They knew, and they lined up, and the coaches ran full westbound for 20 years. Because on one side of the ledger was everything the road would do to you, and on the other side was everything waiting at the end of it. People will endure almost anything for enough hope, moving at 9 miles an hour. They still will. That hasn't changed. Only the vehicles have. You spend one night in Denver, in an actual bed, in a hotel where the walls are muslin stretched on frames, and you can hear 4 separate card games and 1 marriage proposal through them, and the bed tries its best, but your body, perverse to the end, cannot settle without the rocking, and you lie awake in stationary comfort, missing, actually missing, the sway of the box, and somewhere down the street, a piano is being played the way pianos are played in mining towns, as if the instrument owes somebody money. And in the morning, the mountain coach. The Central City run is everything they promised and worse, and it is also, in its terrible way, the finest driving you will ever witness in your life. The coach is smaller, mud-caked, storied with dents. The road up Clear Creek Canyon is a shelf chopped and blasted out of the rock 1 coach wide, with the creek below going white over boulders, and the rule of the road here is that downhill traffic backs up to the turnouts, and the turnouts are cut every so often into the cliff, and every so often is a phrase you develop strong opinions about within the first hour. The driver is a small, ferocious man who chews an unlit cigar down to nothing, and replaces it, and takes blind bends behind 4 horses at a speed that is either perfectly calculated or insane, and you will never learn which. And on the inside of the coach some previous passenger has carved into the window frame, neatly with serifs, the words, "It is better not to look." You look. Of course you look. 19. The creek is a very long way down, and there is a broken freight wagon in it, sun-bleached, wedged among the rocks like a lesson. But here is the thing about that canyon road. The thing you understand halfway up with your knuckles white on the seat rail. The plains crossing taught you the road's language, and now you can hear this driver speaking it fluently at speed. The checked pace before each blind bend. The horn, an actual brass horn, blown to warn the turnouts, the way he reads the road surface 50 feet ahead through the leader's ears. You are not calm, but you're no longer a greenhorn, because you know what you are watching. 9 days ago you would have seen a maniac. Now you see a craftsman working close to the edge of his craft, which is a different thing, and the difference is everything you learned between the Missouri River and here. Central City at last in the afternoon. A town poured into a gulch like batter. Buildings stacked up both slopes. The whole valley terraced and gutted and heaped with pale mine tailings. stamp mills pounding day and night, an actual physical pounding you feel in your feet through the ground, the heartbeat of the whole enterprise, dozens of ore-crushing stamps rising and falling, and the creek below the town running grey as dishwater with rock flour, and not a whole tree standing within a mile, all of it gone into timbering and firewood and sluices, and it is ugly and it is loud, and it is one of the richest square miles on the face of the earth, and men from every state and half of Europe are walking its one absurd tilted street in the afternoon light. You find the recorder's office before you find a meal. Priorities. A clerk with sleeve garters and a ledger the size of a tombstone runs his finger down the pages, and you stand there with your heart going like the stamp mills, and the finger stops. Merit. J. Recorded claim, Nevada Gulch District. Assessments, current to April, intact. Yours to prove up as heir, with the letter and an affidavit and the fees, which come when the clerk totals them to $11.50. $11.50 at the end of a $175 road. You walk out into the pounding afternoon and up the gulch trail the clerk described, past sluices and shaft mouths and men who nod at a stranger, the brief economical nod of men paid by the foot, and you find it near the head of the gulch by the blazes on the corner stakes, a rectangle of steep rocky ground with a windlass over a shaft maybe 40 feet down, a shovel gone rust-furred leaning where a hand left it, and a dugout cabin the size of a smokehouse with a door on leather hinges, and inside the dugout on a shelf squared to the shelf's edge the way he squared everything his whole life, your brother's other boots. You sit down in the doorway of the dugout on ground that is now pending $11.50, merit ground, with the stamp mills pounding below and the light going long and gold up the gulch, and you take out the letter you have carried 900 miles and read it again, though you know it entire, and there is a line in it you have read 50 times, and it reads differently at the head of Nevada Gulch than it read in a farm kitchen in Ohio. "Come out, Eli," he wrote. "The road will try to kill you, and the country will make it worth the trouble. Both halves true, you can testify now. Both halves exactly true. You will work that claim. That's a different story, with its own winters in it, and I will keep it for another night. It pays, not a fortune. Gulch claims mostly didn't, but wages and better, enough to send money home, enough that in 3 years you own a share of a stamp mill and in 6 a freight outfit. Because you noticed, on the road out, what everyone who kept their eyes open noticed. The pick makes some men rich, but the wheel gets paid every single day. And the road itself, the great road you crossed, let me tell you how it ended, because it ended fast, and you were there for all of it. In 1866, 1 year after your crossing, Ben Holliday, the Napoleon of the Plains who had bullied and bought and built the mightiest staging empire in the world, looked east at the Union Pacific grading crews coming across Nebraska a mile a day, did the one piece of arithmetic that mattered, and sold. Sold everything, coaches, stations, stock, contracts, the whole 6,000-mile kingdom to Wells Fargo for cash and stock, and got out clean, and men called him a fool for selling and then watched what he had seen coming. Come. The rails reached Cheyenne in 67. Each mile of track killed the stage line behind it, station by station. The coaches running now only from the railhead onward. The great through line chopped shorter every month like a candle burning at one end. In May of 1869 at Promontory Summit they drove the last spike, and a telegrapher tapped one word to both oceans, "Done," and a man could ride from Omaha to Sacramento in 4 days in a chair, in a car, with a stove, and that was that. 20 years of the Overland Stage, the whole roaring civilization of it, the Jehus and the swing stations and the sinkers and the kidney belts and the mail, that didn't know what Thursday was, gone. Not in a decline, but in a snap, like a lamp blown out. The stations fell in. You saw some of them yourself, riding the railroad east in 71 to fetch your mother. Sod walls slumping back into the prairie they were cut from. Corrals down. A doorway standing alone here and there with grass in the threshold. And from the train window at 35 miles an hour behind glass with a cinder or two tapping the pane, you watched 100 miles of your own hardest memories go by in 3 hours and could not make the two speeds live in the same mind. There is the swell where the driver said, there, gone in a breath, is a black smear that was Godfrey's. The passengers around you complained mildly about the dust in the car. You said nothing. What was there to say? You had crossed when crossing cost something, and the cost was the thing nobody could explain afterward. And every old overlander you ever met to the end of the century in banks and barber shops and at funerals gave the same crooked half-smile when the stage road came up in talk. And if you own that smile yourself, there is no need, and if you don't, there is no way. Cole drove for Wells Fargo till the through line died, then drove in the mountains, Georgetown, Leadville, where rails came late, and died old, in bed, in a room, which for a Jehu is a triumph. Uncle Dan you never could trace, and he is one of the 10,000 the road swallowed whole. No photograph, no grave you could find, 1 hour on a coach box and a sentence about patience. And that, it turns out, can be enough of a man to keep. Whitaker, the boy from the burned station, your age exactly, he stayed with the company, became a division agent before he was 30, and 40 years later, an old man in Omaha, he wrote a small memoir that maybe 400 people ever read, and you were one of them. And on page 61 you found the night of the storm and the ford, told from inside the coach. And he had put down, in his plain agent's hand, that there were 2 young fellows on the roof that night that never showed the white feather, and you sat with the book open on your knees for a long time, an old man reading an old man, both of you 19 forever in the rain on top of the mail. And Mrs. Aldrich's daughter, the crying baby of the middle bench, the youngest overlander of them all. She lived to ride in an automobile, and then to fly in an aeroplane, and in 1935, 70 years old, she was interviewed by a Denver newspaper about crossing the plains by stagecoach as an infant. And she said, and I have read the clipping, that of course she remembered nothing at all, except that all her life, all her long life, she had never once been able to fall asleep except in a rocking chair. Some things the road writes in you where remembering can't reach. It wrote in you too. You know exactly where. Come back now, one last time, to the night of the ford. Because that is where I want to leave you, and you'll understand why. Not the crossing itself. After. Valley Station, 1 in the morning, the gates barred behind you, the storm gone east, and you on a buffalo robe on a packed clay floor with your boots off for the first time in 8 days, and your 2 feet pointed at a banked fire. Around you in the dark hall, the others. Hup's sawmill snore steady as a mill ought to be. Foss muttering prices in his sleep. The minister's breathing, light and dry. Somewhere beyond the wall, the soft stamp and blow of horses in the corral. Cavalry mounts and your 6 heroes together. The tired mare with her nose in real hay at last, having pulled a coach out of a flood and thought nothing of it, thinking nothing of it now, being a horse, which is a kind of grace. Through the far wall, faintly, the telegraph key ticking its cold bright news across the dark, and then falling silent, the operator done, the wire humming onto itself over 400 miles of wet grass. And in your body, the road, sway, drop, catch, the phantom motion rolling on through your stillness like a sea remembered by a man ashore, your inner ear faithfully driving a team through the dark long after the team is stabled and you have stopped fighting it and it has changed somewhere in the last hour from torment into something else, into a rocking. Because that is the last secret of the box, the one I have been keeping for the end. Twain called the Concord a cradle on wheels, and he was making a joke, and he was not making a joke. 9 strangers, packed shoulder to shoulder, swaying together in the dark, breathing together, leaning on each other without asking, sleeping on each other without apology, rocked mile after mile through an immense and dangerous night by hands they had to trust because there was no alternative to trusting them. That is a cradle. That is exactly a cradle. The road just charged admission. And every human being who ever rode it, the drummer and the widow and the soldier and the fool, went into that box a stranger and came out knowing something that people in the fast, sealed, comfortable vehicles that came after would have to learn some other way, or not learn, that you can be carried, that you can put your head on an unchosen shoulder in the dark and be no less yourself in the morning. That most of the crossing, any crossing, is done not by courage but by endurance. And endurance is mostly just staying in the box while somebody sings to the horses. Your eyes are heavy now, I know, mine too. Let them be heavy. The fire has burned down to a red breathing. The hall is warm at the floor. Your legs ache the good deep ache of work that is finished and paid. Nothing owing, nothing due before morning, and morning is a long way off and belongs to other people. Tomorrow there will be a fresh team. Tomorrow there will be the last miles and the mountains standing up and the doors of the rest of your life. Tomorrow the mail goes through, because the mail always goes through, but that's tomorrow. Tomorrow can keep. Right now there is only the robe under you, and the floor under the robe, and the patient earth under the floor. The same earth that carried the buffalo and the coaches and the rails and everything after, holding you up the way it has held up every tired creature since tiredness began, asking nothing, going nowhere. You're warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. You crossed the flood and the flood is behind you. You watch the dark and the dark passed over. You have a wall around you and a fire beside you and people breathing near you who would stand up for you in the night. And you know it for a fact, because some of them already did. That's more than most of the sleeping world can say. That's enough. Listen. The sounds are going now, one by one, the way they go. The fire, settling softer. The horses still. The wire on the poles outside humming its one low note over the dark grass. 400 miles of it. A thread of song strung across a sleeping country, and under it here and there a station light, a lamp in a sod window, a stock tender awake with his coffee so that other men can sleep. All down the long road, all night, every night, the little lights and the humming wire and the grass moving and nobody watching but the stars. Centuries will pass. The road you crossed will change beyond recognition. The ruts will grass over and the rails will come, and after the rails the highways in the same valley of the Platte will carry 6 lanes of light, moving at speeds no Jehu could dream, and the crossing that ate 9 days of your one life will take an afternoon, and then hours, and travellers will pass Godfrey's and Cedar Ford, and the swell where the mountain stood up, and never know and never need to. But people will still go west, still sell what they have for a ticket and a hope, still sit strangers together in a moving box and nod off and let a head fall on a shoulder, still trust their lives every day without thinking to the hands of someone up front they never met. Some things don't change. The human heart doesn't change. The need for rest at the end of a hard road, that doesn't change either. So let it come. Let sleep take you the way it took Elias Merritt on a buffalo robe behind sod walls 160 years ago, all at once and entirely, like a flood takes a fence rail. Let the world fade. Let the noise quiet. Let your thoughts slow and soften and finally stop. The team is stabled. The gates are barred. The mail can wait for morning, and so can everything else. You've earned this rest. You crossed today, whatever your crossing was. Take it and dream of long grass and far mountains and a slow, deep rocking, sway, drop, catch, carrying you gently the whole night through. Good night.